Hey guys, welcome back. You're listening to The Financially Savvy Chick. I am Tamar. So in today's video, I want to talk about how the dollar could go to zero and the U.S. defaults. Well, as we know, with the U.S. and global debt exploding, prior to both assets and debt imploding, let's look at the disastrous consequences for the U.S. and the world. Debt explosion, leading to the currency becoming worthless, has happened in history for as long as there has been some form of money. And this is whether we talk about 3rd century Rome, 18th century France, or the 20th century Weimar Republic, and many more. We're at it again, where another monetary era and another guaranteed collapse is imminent. There's no means of avoiding the final collapse of a boom brought about by credit expansion. This disastrous borrowed propensity, with zero ability to repay the surging debt, will lead to one of the three consequences. 1, the US dollar goes to zero. 2, the US defaults. Or 3, both of the above. The most likely outcome is number 3. In my view, the dollar is going to go to zero and the US dollar. The US is going to default pretty much, okay? And the same will happen to most countries. I'll outline the consequences for the world at the end of this video. Though many people say that the US can never default, that is, of course, absolute nonsense. If a country prints worthless debt that nobody will buy in a currency that no one wants to hold, the country has definitely defaulted whenever spin they put on it. In the next few years, not just the US, but all sovereign debt will only have one buyer, which is the country that issues the debt. And every time a sovereign state buys its own debt, it has to issue more worthless debt that nobody will touch with a bark pole. Printing more money to pay for previous sins has never worked, and it never will. And this is how money dies, just like it has throughout history. The current monetary era started with the foundation of the Fed in 1913, and the acceleration of debt and currency debasement since 1971, when Nixon closed the gold window. And that was the year of the greatest theft of the citizens of this country. For real, when he took the dollar when he took gold off the economy, off of being backed by gold, and start with that fiat currency, that was, he took the wealth of every citizen in this country. Because what they did was they told people to turn in their gold, and in exchange for people turning in their gold, they gave them currency. But what you didn't know is they gave them less money than what their gold was actually worth. And then if people wanted to take their money to go back and repurchase their gold, it was quite more expensive, and they couldn't even buy it back. That's real bold to do something like that. Well, just over 100 years into this era, it's now approaching the end, like they all do. It seems like every 100 years something happens with the economy. Global currencies are already down 97 point. Well, they're down 97 to 99% since 1971. And we can now expect that the final 1 to 3% decline for all money to become virtually worthless. This is, of course, nothing new in history, since every single currency has always gone to zero. Now, the only currency, to my knowledge, that will never go to zero is silver and gold. We must, of course, remember that the final 1 to 3% move means 100% fall from today. The final collapse is always the quickest, so it could happen in the next 2 to 5 years. And because we're based on debt, and more debt, we're going to see how it all evolved. Although the U.S. debt has increased virtually every year since 1930, the acceleration started in the late 60s and 70s with gold backing the dollar. And therefore, most currencies until 71, the ability to borrow more money was restricted without depleting the gold reserves. Since the gold standard prevented Nixon to print money and buy votes to stay in power, he conveniently got rid of those shackles temporarily, right? This was temporarily, as he declared on August 15th of 71. Politicians don't change, okay? We know this. Powell and Lagarde recently called the increase in inflation transitory, which is a lie. But in spite of their bogus predictions, inflation has continued to rise. Since 1971, the total U.S. debt has gone up 53 times, with the GDP only up 22 times, as the current graphs show, based on the economy. Now, Audi used to be a budget-friendly, you know what? I'll be honest with you, Audi is probably still the most budget-friendly go-to grocery store right now. And even their prices are rising. Their French fries cold cut used to be $1.55. And now they're $2.49. Loaf of bread used to be 79 cents. It's now $1.95. Their hot dog buns used to be 79 cents. Now they're $1.09. Dollar Tree is no longer $1, it's $1.25. And they're probably going to have to go up to $1.50. Mark my words. As the widening gap between debt and GDP is taking place, it's more debt. It takes ever more debt to achieve increases in GDP. So without printing worthless money, the real GDP is going to slow to in decline, right? So this is what our politicians are doing. They're buying votes and creating fake growth through printed money. This gives the voter the illusion of increased income and wealth. Unfortunately, they don't grasp that the illusion increase in living standard is all based on debt and devalued money. Since Reagan became president in 1981, the U.S. federal debt was on average doubled every 8 years. Then, when Trump inherited the 20 trillion debt from Obama in 2017, we forecast that the debt would double by 2025 to 40 trillion. But I don't think we're going to make it to 2025 to hit 40 trillion. We're already at 40 trillion. It's 2022. Now, that still looks like a valid prediction, but with the economic problems, expect a 50 trillion debt by 2025. Okay? So presidents know they can't buy the love of the people by running chronic deficits and printing money to make up for the difference. But if we look at the graph, which you guys can head over, you can kind of look this up at the usfed.gov. You can go to the federal government website and you can kind of look up these graphs and charts yourself. But it shows that the graph shows that our debt has gone up 35% since 81, but that the tax revenue has only increased 8 times. Okay, so this is from it's just not looking good. How can any sane person believe that with debt going up 4.5 times faster than tax revenue, that the debt can ever be repaid? The debt can never be repaid. Even worse, the U.S. interest payments on the debt surging from around 0% is probably 5% by 2025. The interest on the debt will climb to $2 trillion, or circa 30% of the annual budget. So with higher interest rates, higher deficits, and rising inflation, the scene is set for a high or hyperinflationary period in the next few years. We're already in hyperinflation, okay? I talked about this in another video of mine. So virtually every observer believes that the Fed will not just stop raising interest rate, but pivot and lower them again. This will not happen except for possibly a very short term. The 40-year interest rate downtrend finished in 2020, and the world is unlikely to see low or negative rates for many years or decades. They can't afford to do it. They just cannot, you guys. High inflation and high rates will continue for years, but as we can see in the 40-year chart of the 10 years of the U.S. Treasury, there are going to be many corrections in the coming uptrend. The money supply is growing at 74% annualized. This is an issue. Between August of 71 and August of 2019, the U.S. money supply grew at 6.1%. So, fresh problems emerged before COVID took place and before Ukraine, but those two new crises obviously exacerbated the systemic problems that had been put on ice for 10 years. Now, this led to massive money printing, and M1 in the U.S. no longer increased at 6% annually, but it hyperinflated to 74%. Central banks are always wrong, and they're always behind the curve. They kept short-term rates at zero or negative for over a decade. They shouldn't have did that. In 2009 to 2019, the balance sheets of major central banks increased by 13 trillion. But then in August of 2019 to 2022, an explosion in central bank debt took place. And y'all see those 2 years, right? Y'all see between that time frame? Expanding their balance sheets 23 trillion from 13 trillion to 36 trillion, all the same reasons that the U.S. money supply are obviously also valid for global debt expansion. There's nothing like free money. The stimulus checks that citizens received in the U.S. were not free, and you're paying it back. If you got a $2,300 stimulus check, you actually paying back maybe 3 times that amount. Think about it. Gas, food, energy costs, rents. So that money was not free. The banks created this money at zero cost. They did no work, nor did they produce any goods or services. All they needed to do was to press a button. And with interest rates at zero or negative, many central banks were actually receiving interest from lenders. It's a Ponzi scheme. Okay? Any private swindler launching such a scheme, a Ponzi scheme like Madoff did, would spend the rest of their life in prison. But banksters are praised for saving the system because they're just too big to fail. What virtually no individual understands is that this free money then enters the financial system as having a realistic intrinsic value when it doesn't. As with all Ponzi schemes, the current financial system will collapse too, as the holders of fake paper money realize that the money is worthless and the inferior is totally naked. That will be the final phase of the current monetary system with unlimited money printing, as the 2.3 quadrillion debt pyramid collapsed. Okay? The estimated 2 trillion quadrillion gross derivatives is today's quasi-debt, but will one day become a real debt. Central banks are attempting to rescue the financial system. They really are. And it's too late. Within the next 5 years or so, the triangle is likely to be inverted, and the central bank gold as a foundation will be at the bottom. But instead of gold being only 0.1% of global liabilities, it will be as much as maybe 20%. Personally, I don't believe that in a lasting form of reset with a new currency system backed by gold. I cannot see 3 major gold producers and holders: China and Russia and India agreeing with the U.S. on a reevaluation. It's questionable if the U.S. has anywhere near 8,000 tons of gold that they are declaring to have. Instead, after the fake paper market in gold has collapsed, the price must be based on supply and demand of unencumbered physical gold or free gold. But that can only happen after the current financial system based on fake money, debt, and derivatives no longer function. The consequences of this is that the world must pay for excesses of the last 50 years, and the consequences will be dire as we are facing a major catalysm or disorderly reset, which will involve debt defaults, sovereign, corporate, and private, bursting of epic bubbles in stocks, bonds, and property, a major geopolitical conflict with no desire for peace, secular fall of living standards due to higher cost of energy and energy shortages, food shortages leading to major famine and civil unrest, political and economic instability and corruption. No country will be able to afford Social Security or pension, inflation, hyperinflation, and later deflationary implosion. I sincerely hope that these predictions will not take place, because if they do, everyone will suffer dramatically for an extended period. No one, rich or poor, will avoid these problems. And I keep trying to tell this and share this with certain people. Some people think they're going to escape what's coming. And I've got news for you. No one's going to escape what's coming. Okay? Everyone's going to be impacted at some point. But what I'm saying is that the risk of a major catastrophe has never been higher in history whenever it actually happens. Physical gold and silver will not save you, but clearly be the best financial insurance you can hold. Remember to support your family and friends. You should set up a support system. And remember that in addition to family and friends, some of the best things in life are free, like nature, reading books, and hobbies. I hope you felt this video was helpful. I hope you are planning for the inevitable, and I hope you see the writing on the wall. Be sure to check out our website, financiallysavvychick.com. Check out our blogs. Until next time, shalom.